Hello people of YouTube, my name is Brad. This is my channel Animate Orange, where I build and review a lot of 3D metal models. In this video we are going to talk about the AK-47 build from PieceFun. PieceFun, you say? That is not a name I usually talk about on this channel. I have done a PieceFun model once before. PieceFun, if you don't know, is a Chinese brand, and they make a lot of different models. They make a lot of models that are made by other companies, as you might say, copycat models. They do make a lot of copycats of Metal Earth and PieceCool models. Maybe that's where the name comes from. I'm not really sure. And I don't normally encourage that sort of thing. I don't normally encourage, I don't really encourage the purchase and building of copycat models, because I feel that takes a little bit away from the company that's taken the time to secure the licenses for these particular models. But it being a Chinese company, I guess the rules are a little different. However, this is not a copy of any of the Metal Earth or PieceCool or Tenyo, any of the bigger names. Did a little bit of looking online myself. Now, PieceFun, if you can find PieceFun models on AliExpress, possibly eBay, maybe GearBest, but you're not usually going to find them by the name PieceFun. More often than not, it seems they don't actually advertise or show that it's a PieceFun model, and I think that's probably because a lot of the models are copied from others. Maybe there's some deception, maybe not. I don't want to get into that debate. I don't want to get into much of a debate about licenses and who has the right to sell what. Well, a lot of their stuff can be found in many different places, usually at a cheaper price, but there's usually a cost otherwise, as in a lot of times the metal is not quite as sturdy, the packaging is more generic, big deal, or the instructions are not as clear. A lot of the copy models that I have gotten a few copies, are just Xerox copies. The instructions are just Xerox copies of the originals, with the color being left out, so some of the instructions are lost. This is the packaging for this particular model. You see it's somewhat generic, and it has a label talking about what is in this particular package. Now, with it being a mostly unique model, I don't have that big a deal with it. If the big companies aren't providing it and somebody else is making it, that's great, go for it. I certainly can't argue with that. As far as the AK-47 is concerned, I did look around. While I don't see it being made by Metal Earth or PieceCool or Tenyo or the bigger names, I did see it's also available through HK, as well as a couple of other companies that are somewhat known for being copycats. So who owns who made it originally, who owns the rights, who copied who, I don't know. I don't want to get too much into that. But it being a unique model and being something that was sent in by a viewer, I had to give it a try. So yes, this was sent in by someone who watches this channel. Thank you, Justin Schuler, for sending me this model to build. It is a fun, neat little model, very small parts and small details to work out. This was an interesting challenge, and it was very interesting trying to get things nice and sturdy. And you'll notice that some of the things are a bit wobbly. It was very difficult to get the tools into the very narrow and small areas to secure them, and some of the parts suffer. It could definitely benefit from some drops of glue, or some either super glue or maybe some UV glue to solidify and hold the tabs in place so it doesn't wobble as much. But it's not something I'm going to play with. It's something I'm going to put on its nice little stand that we have here and put on display up on a shelf somewhere. So some of that wobbling is not that big a deal unless your shelf is particularly wobbly. I mean, not being very familiar with guns and not being at all familiar with the AK-47, this was an interesting challenge to build. And the instructions, and I kind of mentioned this a little bit already, the instructions being a Chinese knockoff brand were not the most detailed and not the most clear. There was a lot of lacking in what curves should be where and how to curve things. Metal Earth has gone to more and more trouble as their instructions and directions have evolved, to trying to give you an idea of what angles things should be folded at, what curves should be made in different parts. They even sometimes give you an outline of an edge view so you have an idea of how to shape and curve things. I don't remember seeing any of that in the instructions for this particular model, so it certainly helps to be familiar with what you're building, because you're not going to get much indication from the instructions on how to shape things. So that added a level of challenge certainly not enough that I couldn't overcome it, as you see here. I'm not terribly familiar with the design of an AK-47, but I do have some idea of how a gun is made in general. So, you know, I know this is the clip, I know this is a grip, I know this is a trigger, though as I was working on this video earlier, I noticed I put the trigger on backwards. Oops. I also think I put this piece here on backwards, and this is a piece that I'm just not familiar with and could not find a completed model at the time of this build to compare this to know how to do it correctly. So it introduces a different challenge. With PieceFun, there is no online website you can go to see a 360 completed model that you can then reference. There's no website you can go to download instructions if you've lost your own. So there is a detriment to buying a PieceFun model. You save a little money, but you don't have quite the same support. I mentioned that with PieceFun models and copycat models, sometimes the metal is not up to the same standard. This isn't too bad. This seemed to be fairly comparable to a Metal Earth model. And I also mentioned that I have built other PieceFun models before. Here we have a Danboard. This is another model that I put together some time back. This was from PieceFun. I picked this model up because it was a unique model. I did not see it available anywhere else, and it's something that I thought would be fun to build, and I really wanted to build it. So, not being a copycat, I didn't have too much guilt in picking this one up in particular. However, I do remember, as I was building this model, this poor guy needs a little dusting. As I was building this model, I did notice the metal was a bit softer. And some of these long parts with the bends, I had to really hold both sides as I was bending it because it didn't want to do a sharp bend. This box has 90-degree angles. It wanted to do a softer, bigger sort of flex than a sharp bend. And I had some issues with that. I can't say that I noticed the same thing with this particular model, but with the exception of these two middle pieces, there weren't a lot of large pieces to softly bend, so it really didn't stand out that the metal may have been softer, and it may have been similar to the Danboard model, but it may have been a sturdier metal. Whether or not that's just an evolution, this is more recently purchased, maybe they've improved their metal a little bit, maybe it's because it's a Chinese company, they were made in different factories and used different metals. I don't know, I can't say for sure, but this particular model with this size didn't really have any issues with things not wanting to bend the way I wanted them to bend. I didn't have any issues with the metal being soft and bending incorrectly or not on the seam where I wanted it to bend, but I also spent a lot of time, because this is such small pieces, really making sure I was doing the bend correctly. So the softer metal may have been the metal may have been just as soft, but it wasn't as big an issue with this particular model. I did have pictures of an AK-47 to look at, though I didn't see one with a clear identity on that piece. I certainly should have gotten the trigger better. That just makes more sense. I know enough to know that I got that backwards. But at the time, I wasn't sure which way it was oriented, so I didn't check as carefully as I should. I am very thankful that I had some precision tweezers when I was building this model, because so many of these tabs were in tight little places. To try and get to them, I needed a pointed set of tweezers to carefully get in there and grab between the tab and the side of something and bend it over a little, and then switch to the other precision tweezers, which I'd ground the tips down a bit to kind of push the tab down flat, and that's how I got many of these pieces connected. It's also partially why they're loose, because there just wasn't much room to do any twisting, at least not any secure twisting of tabs to get things in place. I spent a lot of time trying to shape this barrel, and then broke off the end piece by mistake because there was some extra almost flash that I had to clip off, and trying to clip that off broke the end off, so that's unfortunate. There's just a lack of familiarity with how this was to be constructed. Like, this centerpiece is a angular box shape. I wasn't sure about that, and the instructions don't indicate which way it's supposed to be, so I spent some time trying to make sure, does this centerpiece where the clip and trigger are, is it rounded on the bottom, or is it just an angle? It took me a bit to figure it out. It's angled, and I continued on, but that made it take more time. I sometimes talk about how long a model is versus how long it feels it is. This model took an hour and 15 minutes, but it felt like it took a little bit longer because, in part, I was spending that time carefully trying to get in and do those tabs, and I spent time doing research trying to understand how it comes together. and because there was just some time spent trying to think about and interpret the lack of directions into how it's actually supposed to be shaped. So it made it feel like it took a little bit longer than it did. It didn't feel like it was an hour and 15 minutes. Still an enjoyable build. I still thank you very much, Justin, for sending me this model. This is something I probably wouldn't have got on my own, but it's a fun experience to do it. And I'll tell you, this is definitely one of those models that as I was building it, I'm thinking this is not going to turn out well at all, and the end result is not too bad. I'm impressed with myself. Excuse me, don't mean to sound arrogant, but I really didn't think this was going to turn out as good as it did. However, if you look at it straight on, it's a little bit wonky. This is definitely going to go on its little stand and be left alone after I've done recording this, because it is not as secure as I'd like. If I had it to do again, I probably would have some glue on hand to drop in there, take some more time, and get the parts more sturdy and straight. But the main objective of this was to make a video out of it, so I kind of moved forward and kept going. The instructions also have you attach this top piece here to the bottom. There's just one tab holding it on, and it kind of loosely indicates you should attach that and then move on with building the front part. I didn't do it that way. I shaped this part, I sat it on there, I looked how that's just that one tab holding it on. That's not a very secure connection. There's just one flap that could easily get bent out of place. Didn't connect it because I could see me working with it as I went along and moving it and actually knocking this off and possibly breaking the tab or this back piece. So I left that off. I built the other pieces that it attaches to, and then when it come time to attach this other piece to the top and the gun itself, then I added this top piece back on and connected them all at the same time, so it wasn't going to wobble around and break something. I feel that is a safer way to do it than to follow the instructions exactly as they say, and that's the way I chose to do it. The shape in the butt here, I decided to use a flare tool because it has a very, or at least I felt like it had a very slight flare to it, but in hindsight maybe not so much. Probably didn't need it. Could have used a straight rounded tool to shape that, and it turned out better than I expected. This is one of those shapes that you're either going to get it right the first time and great, or you're not, and you're going to spend a lot of time struggling trying to get it back into the shape. And I only spent a little bit of time trying to pinch it after I was done to get it into shape. So interesting challenge, interpreting the directions and trying to get some of the shapes, but still a fairly easy model. But I consider this a starter model? No, not quite close. I'd consider it something you could do fairly early on after you've done a few models and got a feel for how the metal works, but I wouldn't start with this. If you have several models under your belt though, and you're into guns, grab one of these. It's a lot of fun, and it will certainly challenge you in different ways. Now I'm going to leave it at that. As always, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them down below. I do thank you for watching. I want to thank my Patreon supporters for continuing to support me as I make these videos, build videos, review videos, and news videos at the end of the week. I do also want to give another special thanks to Justin for sending me this model to build. There's also another one that he sent me that'll be coming up in the future, so keep an eye out for that. There's several models in the queue. I'm constantly working. Thank you for watching, and keep on keeping on.